Video idea. Hey Stan, one of your viewers here, Madeline. I saw this video and thought it was interesting what she said. Can you unpack this topic a little more, especially for those who really want help, especially for those who really want to help their clients who may have issues? I know the guidelines for every state is different. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Legally, as a cosmetologist or a hairstylist, I am not allowed to tell you that you have dermatitis, psoriasis, eczema, dry scalp, baldness, alopecia, none of those things, because guess what? They have to do with your scalp and not your hair. As a cosmetologist or hairstylist, I went to school to maintain the health of your hair or the integrity of your hair and not your scalp. So the only thing I can do as your stylist is to let you know that your scalp looks abnormal, and I recommend you go to a dermatologist. Okay, if there are sores, open wounds in your scalp, I have to stop doing my job and send you to a dermatologist. Legally, I cannot continue my service on your hair if you come in with those things on your scalp. Okay, what I can do is, once a dermatologist has prescribed you with a certain shampoo, you can bring it to me, and then I can help bring the health of your scalp back to life after your dermatologist has told you what you have or diagnosed you with something. But other than that, that's not my job, baby. I didn't go to school for that. Don't let these stylists come and tell you what you have because they don't know. And hairstylists, don't go tell your clients what they have because you don't know. Okay, that's not our job. Let these people go to dermatologists and we keep it pushing. We're here to take care of the help and nothing else. Alrighty? Alright. Are we all on the same page? Yes? Cool beans. That is the lesson.
So when I first saw the video, right, at first I was like, okay, like, what's the big deal? But apparently a lot of people had a problem with what she had to say. A lot of people had a problem with what she had to say, and if you look in the comments, you can see that, right? I'll put a couple of the comments on the screen. All I'm going to do is give you the basic law, right? The basic law of cosmetology, trichology, and dermatology, because a lot of cosmetologists are too prideful to say that this woman is right, but she's right. And the spots where people think that she's wrong are all rooted in pride, and I'm proving to you. But just wait, let me listen. What are the key definitions? Number one, a cosmetologist. What is your job and what are you actually licensed to do? I think most of the confusion comes from the place of us always trying to decide who's better, like who's the best between a cosmetologist, a trichologist, or a dermatologist, and nobody's better than anybody else. We have a system. Here it is. So a cosmetologist is a non-medical certification, right? You're trained in beauty. It's really about external factors. Hair, scalp, styling, treatments, but from a non-medical sense. We have a little bit of training on the human scalp, but we'll get into that in a second. Number two is going to be a trichologist. Now, a trichologist is somebody that studies the scalp and the human hair shaft from a biological standpoint, right? Through biology, a lot deeper than what they go through in the cosmetology programs. They put it from a biology to a pathology perspective, but this is not a medical doctor. And unfortunately, a lot of cosmetology certifications stop and they don't include trichology. It makes sense for trichology to be included in cosmetology, but what you guys fail to realize, like I talked about in the video listed in the description box below, Black women fought not to have to go to cosmetology school in general, right? That's why you have so many that's how you have so many unlicensed cosmetologists or braiders who've been to nobody's school, right? Because Black women fought so Black women don't have to go to school. If you just go to cosmetology school, they don't include, training about scalp and follicle infections and hair shaft disorders. You learn like the basics, how to spot it, but you don't learn treatment. But I digress. Next up is dermatology. A dermatologist is a medical doctor. They specialize in skin, scalp, and hair issues and their overall connection. They can diagnose, prescribe, and treat medically. In some cases, you can get scalp biopsies, different surgeries like follicle transplants and things of that nature. Those are all done through your dermatologist. So, when it comes to laws, many state boards explicitly stand against licensed cosmetologists being able to treat and diagnose scalp or follicle infections. You are not allowed to diagnose a disease as a cosmetologist. You are not. For example, Wisconsin's cosmetology board law literally states that no licensed cosmetologist can diagnose any infection or disorder of the skin. It's literally there in black and white. Link in the description box below. New York's law also says the same exact thing, that cosmetologists are not licensed or prohibited to diagnose any type of scalp or hair follicle disease or disorder. Check California's law in the description box. In many, if not all states, when it comes to cosmetology, it's only looked at as something to go to for beautification or for maintenance, never for diagnosis or treatment of scalp or follicle infections. And this is the main reason why I went after trichology, or went deeper into the science of hair, understanding that I cannot run a practice with simply just my cosmetology license, because it is against the law in Nevada, where I was at, or where I still reside, for me to do that with just a cosmetology license. So the scope of practice status with the cosmetology license literally prohibits you from diagnosing or treating any scalp or follicle disorder. It's a fact. When it comes to scalp and follicle infections in cosmetology school, we are taught to recognize things. So I was taught to recognize what dandruff, folliculitis, and seborrheic dermatitis and lice looked like, right? I know what it looked like, so this way I held the right to refuse service, because these are scalp and follicle infections that are contagious. Most women don't know this, but dandruff is contagious. That's why when you have videos like this where women are scraping up dandruff in a hair salon, is actually one of the worst things you can do as a cosmetologist, because dandruff is not dry scalp. Dandruff is actually oily scalp due to an over infestation of Malassezia yeast, right? And a couple of other bacteria that live on the scalp. So dandruff is actually a bacterial infection. So by you scraping up this bacterial infection, then by you scraping up this bacterial infection, you're actually spreading it. And not only are you spreading it across the scalp for your client, you're spreading it to other clients. And the reason that the laws prohibit cosmetologists from diagnosing scalp disorders is because most cosmetologists don't know that dandruff is not dry scalp. Most cosmetologists don't know that dandruff is oily scalp. Why? Because cosmetology does not cover scalp disorders on that level, which is why by law cosmetologists are not licensed to diagnose or treat scalp or follicle infections, right? Most cosmetologists see dry scalp and add what? Oil. Why? Because cosmetologists are not trained and do not have the proper education to understand what scalp and follicle infections are and how to properly treat them. They haven't been trained on what dandruff is, so they don't understand that adding oil is actually just going to feed the yeast and the bacteria, right? I think that's the point that she was trying to make. In cosmetology, the services are literally cleansing, styling, getting new patterns and routines set, right? So let's say you have a scalp infection or a bacterial infection or something, and your dermatologist tells you, okay, this is seborrheic dermatitis. Here is the shampoo and the conditioner that you're supposed to use. As your cosmetologist, it is my job to incorporate the shampoo and conditioner that your dermatologist gave you to treat this infection into a new pattern and routine that you can have in conjunction with your dermatologist. That's how it works. But a cosmetologist cannot be held in the replacement of a dermatologist. Neither can a trichologist take the space of a cosmetologist. But listen, wait, I'm gonna get there. So a trichologist limit, a trichologist is a non-medical certification. Something that confuses a lot of people, dermatologists, most, not all, but I haven't seen a trichology program that isn't ran by dermatologists. So most trichologists were trained and certified by dermatologists, okay? So my certification, so when it comes to certifications for a trichologist is certified by a dermatologist. So most times a cosmetologist that puts master before her name, sometimes she'll call herself a cosmetologist and a trichologist, or sometimes she just may put master cosmetologist, and that will encompass to her all of the things or whatever the case may be. But most cosmetologists will go back to school to get additional training and maybe sign up for a trichology certification that will take maybe, depending on the certification, there are certification programs where they come in for a weekend and it's like a 4-day certification. It's a crash course. You learn a whole lot, but it's only 4 days, right? And it's an additional certification on top of the license or the cosmetology license that you already have. But then again, there are other programs that go a lot deeper, and then you have to do certain versions of clinical that could take you about a month. It just depends on where you're at. Now, outside of the US, trichology programs can last about a year, right? Because they go a lot deeper. But in the United States, you can take a trichology program as a cosmetologist and it'll last for maybe a couple of days to a week, or it's at your own pace. You do it at home, and it's all dependent on how long it takes you to finish. But that's what a trichologist is, and a trichologist does not. I'll even leave the professional code of ethics for trichologists below, that literally in a nutshell basically just says that we won't go beyond our level of education and our level of training. Now, you do not have to be a cosmetologist to become a trichologist. You that's listening to me right now, if you wanted to right now, you could take a trichology course and become a certified trichologist if that's something you want to do. Does that automatically put you on my level or on a dermatologist level? Absolutely not. It doesn't, because it's still all a matter of how deep you go into your craft. And all trichologists are different, just like all cosmetologists are different, just like all dermatologists are different. They all have their different practices and their own methodologies and their own theologies. Let's go with that one. As a cosmetologist, what can you actually do? The first thing is you can just recognize what doesn't look right on the scalp, like she said. Signs of infection, inflammation, lesions. Like if I'm looking at your scalp, I see cuts and scrapes and bruises. I'm like, and you guys know how I always say, or if you are OG here to my channel, you know that I always say, okay, whenever somebody books me for the first time, they always have to get a consultation. Why? Because I need to assess their scalp. I need to see if I see any signs of inflammation, any abrasions, anything, because then I would be turning them away, but referring them to a trichologist or a dermatologist. And after I referred them to so many trichologists, I was like, girl, I'm about to do this myself. What the hell? I can provide, and then I could provide non-medical care. So for example, let's say that I don't see any abrasions, any scalps, any peeling or anything like that, but I see the beginning stages of it, then that's when I could give you like a clarifying shampoo or a scalp detox to remove some of the buildup to prevent the inflammation, because as a cosmetologist I've been trained to spot the signs of inflammation or the signs of oncoming inflammation or whatever the things are, so I can do preventative measures, right? That's why here on my channel I come to you really as a cosmetologist sometimes, trying to give you preventative measures like, no, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, because in my practice is when I give you the literal aspects on exactly what to do, how to do it, and what steps to follow and all of the things. It's really unprofessional of me to do that, right? To just blurt everything out here on the internet for everybody, for anybody to just then begin to repeat, because again, it's a difference between a cosmetologist, a trichologist, and a dermatologist. But I digress. Let's keep going. Next up, I am supposed to follow my sanitation rules. When you renew your license as a cosmetologist, they're not retraining you on how to pin curl. No, you have to watch all of these videos and answer all of these questions on sanitation. Our job is to make sure our work environment is clean, that we're not passing on diseases, that we're not passing on infections or disorders, which is why scraping dandruff, like I said, is one of the worst things you can do in a hair salon, and that would be put in the category of treating a scalp infection, which as a licensed cosmetologist you are not licensed to do. In California, I'll put the links to everything in the description box below, but they prohibit you from working on infected or inflamed skin, and it's been really hard for cosmetologists to get over that. And a lot of people think that cosmetologists are saying, oh, y'all have to come with y'all hair already shampooed because they're trifling. No, in reality, most of y'all are showing up with scalp infections that they are not licensed to treat. They're actually prohibited from treating it. So with a lot of them are lazy, but there are also a group of cosmetologists that are having you come in with your hair already clean, because it's against the law for them to work on a scalp that has inflammation or an infection. Why do they have these laws and differences to begin with in the first place? The first thing is to get in the way of misdiagnosis, which in my opinion is one of the main reasons why black women struggle to retain length, because for decades you guys have been getting misdiagnosed. If you have dandruff, you'll hear stuff like growing dandruff. So dandruff is a yeast infection of the scalp, right? Dandruff is a bacterial infection, a yeast infection. So to say you have growing dandruff is to say you got a growing scalp infection. You got a growing yeast that grows your hair. No, dandruff does not grow your hair. Dandruff, I talk about what dandruff do in the description box below, but do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, it's just something that doesn't make sense, that's just passed down for generation to generation to generation. Girl, could you stop? And because cosmetologists did not go to school to become a trichologist, or they didn't go to dermatology school, then there's this missing piece, right? And that's why in most states they tell you that a cosmetologist is not legally able to diagnose, to tell you whether or not you have dandruff, seborrheic dermatitis, folliculitis. They can tell you what they think, but then they have to refer you to a cosmetologist or a trichologist, because those two people have been trained on scalp and follicle disorders and hair shaft disorders. But you as a cosmetologist, you have not. You haven't. You didn't do it. Number one, of course, is the risk of misdiagnosis, right? Most cosmetologists, like I said, get confused. They think that dandruff is dry scalp and you're treating an overproduction of oil with oil. So you're ending up causing more balding, more inflammation. Then it goes to seborrheic dermatitis, folliculitis, and this is why most black women have damage. Why? Because there's a missing space. Next up is going to be liability and public safety. Certain regulations are put in place so that way there is a gate between people who are just kind of making up stuff in their room and people who have actually spent the time, the money, and the research and the brain power to not only go to school to learn the information, but then put it together as a system or as a practice to get you a certain result. A cosmetologist didn't do that yet. And this isn't attacking cosmetologists. I am a cosmetologist, but I had to go to get other certifications. When I was just a cosmetologist, I was not qualified to treat scalp and follicle infections. I was not. So as a cosmetologist, my training focused on simply sanitation, so that way I'm not spreading infections or diseases to my clients as one leaves and another one comes in. I also learned basic anatomy of the skin and the hair shaft and the hair growth cycles, right? So the basics of anatomy, absolutely, you learn that in cosmetology school. Yes, learning how something is put together does not encompass learning how to put things back together or put things back on track when they go upside down. It's not the same thing. Recognizing visible disorders like wingworm, dandruff, psoriasis, folliculitis, the very, very basics. Product chemistry, color theory, which was one of my favorite areas, and client consultations. Depending on what cosmetology school you went to, they teach you how to really format your business if you was paying attention. We learn pathology or the cause of scalp infection, so the different things that you do that lead you to an infected scalp, right? This is why we focus, oh my ears. This is why we focus on scalp. This is why we focus on sanitation so much, because not having your tools properly cleansed or not exercising proper storage practices really can determine if whether or not you are going to be able to pass on a disease or not. Cosmetology does not go into the following things: pathology or the cause of certain scalp or follicle infections or hair shaft disorders, different diagnostic methods. We do not address or go over any of those things. Microscopic or lab analysis. These are not things addressed went over in cosmetology school at all, nor is it on state board. As well as medical treatments. Cosmetologists don't go into any of these things. After your licensing, you get to do all of the regular cosmetology stuff, but you are not a dermatologist or a trichologist, and if you want to go deeper into it, you have to go and take those classes. Now again, trichology is the science of the hair and the scalp. I love trichology because to me, trichology bridges the gap between cosmetology and dermatology. I actually love it. The training consists of scalp biology, scalp and hair shaft biology, hair loss causes, diving deep into androgenetic or androgen alopecia, and so many other forms of hair loss. That's one of the main focuses. Scalp microbiome, follicle infections, inflammation, and extreme follicle disorders. We're also trained on the nutrition and internal impact of your diet and your body's microbiome based on the things that you're putting within it and how that reflects your hair growth cycle, your scalp infections, and so many other things. Minor to mild product formulation and safe non-medical treatments. Now, a trichologist is trained to assess and identify certain follicle infections, trained to identify and to interpret different symptoms. However, as a trichologist, you cannot diagnose unless they are medically certified, like an MD. They cannot identify or like just straight up diagnose certain scalp or follicle infections. And they definitely cannot prescribe you a medication as a trichologist. Most trichologists work alongside dermatologists, or they'll work in partnership, in connection to, or have good relationships with dermatologists for them to refer you to if you need further treatment, because again, they are not medical professionals. Now, your trichology certification is a professional certification. It is not a cosmetology license or a dermatology nothing. So you still can't do hair services. Just because you are certified trichologist doesn't mean you can start booking hair appointments and do people's hair. No, those are two completely different things. If you have a trichologist that does hair, she's also a cosmetologist, or she just janky and doing stuff she got no business. So to answer your question, I agree with her 100%, but a lot of people don't want to accept that, because to accept that she's telling the truth would be accepting that all of the people that have been diagnosing y'all at the hair salon have been wrong. And if you one of the people that been letting people scratch stuff up on your scalp and stuff, then girl, you been going to somebody who don't know what they talking about, girl. But I don't know, that's what I got to say. Bye.